Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the latest Collision Hub webinar. This morning, we've got Scott, Jeff, and Bud from ICAR, from the ICAR Tech Center in Appleton, Wisconsin. Well, from their homes today, I guess, but the ICAR Tech Center located in Appleton, Wisconsin. These two gentlemen work out of that office. And we're going to be talking about advanced driver assistance systems and a lot of the offerings that ICAR has to offer. So we are recording today. So for those of you that have peers that maybe weren't able to join us this morning, this will be available for playback later. We're using the webinar feature today, not the meeting feature, so you can't take yourself off of mute and ask questions. But what you can do is either use the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen or the chat function. And if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to type those or raise your hand, and we can take you off of mute and you can ask the question. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask these guys to introduce themselves first. And on my screen, I've got Scott top left, and then Jeff and Bud. So why don't we go around the horn that way? So Scott, why don't you tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about yourself.
So Scott Van Hooley, been with ICAR for just over 10 years now. Started out as a collision tech, doing combination work, everything start to finish, estimating, and then started at ICAR as an instructional designer. And my current role is OEM Technical Relations and RTS. So I manage the team that runs the website. We'll be sharing some things that we've been doing on there. My team develops all the content for that website and does all of the management of that website. So, anything that you have questions on or anything like that, you'll be able to reach out to us and we'll be able to help you with. And we'll show you some of the different things that you may have missed on the website, even if you're familiar with it. There's a lot of additions that you could easily miss.
Thanks, Scott. Jeff.
All right, I'll be next up. Jeff Poole. I work with the Appleton Technical Development Team. Started out as an instructor back in mid-90s on East Coast, Maryland area and Northeast. And eventually joined ICAR full-time in 2006 and working in the instructor training department and other capacities. Ultimately, I was offered a position up at the Appleton Tech Center and made a move up to Appleton in 2014 and been working with the development team ever since, advising them on the technical content. And they put a title on me as subject matter expert, but I think of it as I'm a collision guy. Former tech, and I like to make sure it hopefully tastes right whenever it comes out, and you as the industry get to consume it, get to view it.
Bud.
All right, I guess I'd be the only one left.
Yeah.
My name is Bud Center. I've been with ICAR now for going on 4 years. I've been in the collision industry for closer to probably 36 or 7 years. I work in the Appleton Tech Center as well. My official title is Manager of Automotive Technical Research and Development, which essentially means that I work with the SME team and all the other technical experts in the building with regard to content for courses, research that we're doing, and essentially anything else technical for our course development.
Very good. Well, thanks, guys. Really appreciate you being here. And for those of you on the call today, these three guys are a few of my favorite ICAR folks, and these are some of the collision guys that are out there. And just a quick aside, Scott and I grew up in the same hometown, but a little bit older than him, or quite a bit older than him maybe. But we grew up in the same hometown, and we had the same automotive high school instructor. And Scott, I don't think he's on right now, but I'm sure he'll be watching later. So many thanks to you, Mr. B, for getting us to where we are today. So, hey, with that, let's jump into this. So, guys, can you tell us, what exactly does ICAR have available for ADAS training?
Okay, I think I'll take that one to really start. Currently, ICAR has 11 different courses developed around ADAS specific topics. It ranges everything from specific system operations, parts of those systems, and some example calibrations to things like, what do you need to be thinking about when performing a calibration? So considerations for making sure that you get the calibration performed correctly, that it's accurate. Simple things like a target that is placed, half an inch wrong, if you just a couple of millimeters wrong, and it causes a big problem with calibration. The system may not recognize that the target is placed incorrectly, and it'll still calibrate, and then we've got a problem with it looking in the wrong place. Then we've got courses that talk about things like preparing your business for ADAS calibrations, the tools, equipment, space requirements when you're going to do it in-house. We talk about some of the options for sublet vendors and companies that specialize in ADAS type repairs and mobile type of ADAS repairs. And then we also have a course that talks a little bit about post-repair of ADAS. What do you do for testing and documenting the tests that were performed to confirm the systems are performing as designed. It's something similar, I guess, along what we're talking about here. ICAR currently has some packages available during this COVID time, and while everybody's being forced to work from home. There are 5 different ADAS packages available. They are buy 2, get 1 free. I'm sure most have heard that we're giving away free the ICAR course that is using vehicle maker repair procedures through the end of May. We've got 4 production management courses that are out there as available free through the end of May. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to go out there and get some additional training while we're working from home. But again, we've got quite a large listing of ADAS specific courses for you to take a look at.
Cool. Jeff, are there other courses that maybe aren't ADAS specific that you might recommend for those technicians that are going to be doing ADAS work?
So whenever we start thinking about all the technology that's in the vehicles, and this has been an evolution that we've, I think, all witnessed over the past years, from the initial integration of some of the simple parking sensor type systems to what we have now and approaching autonomous vehicles. These are all electronic systems. There's sensors, there's computers and modules and the interconnecting wires. And I like to say, and many other folks have said this as well, power, ground, and data communicating between the different sensors, modules, and things like that. And all of it works. I'm going to say this, and there might be folks that don't necessarily agree with this approach, but basic electrical principles apply to everything. If there's electrons flowing through it, or there's electrons that should be flowing through it under normal operating conditions, basic electrical theory falls into that bucket real quick. So while we look at these systems, and bolting parts on is one thing, and we plug things in and we power things up, and hopefully everything works the way it should, and we go and we do our calibration. But what happens whenever the calibration fails? And that's where now we have to look at the diagnostics and troubleshooting. And diagnostics and troubleshooting with ADAS systems has some unique nuances, in a sense that depending on what the sensor technology is and what the network communication is in that system, it really comes down to understanding all of those pieces. So we do have a series of electrical and diagnostic courses that right now they're not tailored directly to ADAS. However, they do come in at the electronic systems level. And whenever I think about diagnostics to me is diagnostics. You need to understand electrical theory and circuit measurements with the DVOM whenever you get down to pinpoint testing and troubleshooting methods. And we do have a series of courses that fit into that area on electrical theory and DVM use and troubleshooting, even going into electrical damage inspection, wiring and connector repairs, and things like understanding network communication. That's a huge piece of it that we get into so quickly. And not to take us off topic, when I think about scanning and diagnostics, PreScan and PostScan, and scanning perhaps in process to help with your diagnostic process, interpretation of those codes becomes a huge piece of what has to happen. But more importantly, understanding the hierarchy or the architecture of that system, and what other modules and where that data is coming from that's informing the operation of that ADAS system, because it may not just be the camera and just the radar. It may be a multitude of other onboard systems that are involved in that communication that's happening for the functionality of that particular system. So we do have a series of I'll say, the electrical and electrical diagnostic courses that are a stepping stone into this particular world. And we look to, I'll say, perhaps branch out on that in the future with some more specific stuff.
You know, Jeff, I think so. You mentioned, you know, the word pre-scanning and post-scanning. I think there still are a lot of people out there that are under the belief that there's some silver bullet with these scan tools, and that certainly isn't the case. And I think we need to get rid of the scanning word, I think, and really focus on, you know, collision repair diagnostics or some form of that as well. And I think you make a lot of great points that there's so much more to it, and understanding the systems and you know, how the vehicle operates, understand how the systems themselves operate. You know, I mean, would you agree with that? I mean, how far down do you think we really need to go to understand, you know, CAN bus systems? We need to get that in depth, or can we a little bit higher level, or what do we really need to know, I guess, when it comes to diagnostics from a collision repair diagnostic, maybe not just even ADAS specific, but just overall collision repair diagnostics to be successful on today's vehicles?
Well, I think that depends on where you feel as a business you're going to draw the line of, I can only go this far. You know, whenever I start thinking about this, I think about where Scott was as a combination tech, where he followed his jobs all the way through the shop. I never did. I was a collision tech. I did the body work. I did some structural work, and then it went to the refinish department. And there was a pretty defined line there, except the sand scratches I left in the body filler. Sorry, guys. But there was a pretty clean line there of definition of who's doing what at that point. And so, you know, so I step back with ADAS and I think, well, there's lots of folks out there that perhaps can manage certain calibrations, but and some of the basics of when the calibration, something's wrong and it's not taking, as it were. Gee, what do we do now? Well, it starts out with the visuals of, hey, let's look for what we forgot to plug in, or is the module mounted upside down or backwards, or, you know, those types of things that can happen. But, you know, once you get past that and you step into that diagnostic world, and you are you really going to fix that system? Are you going to resolve that problem correctly? That's where you need to have that deeper understanding of what's really going on out there with all the players in that. I spend a fair amount of time out there on some of the different diagnostic forums, and you know, reading through some of the things that are happening, and you know, kind of monitoring some of the challenges. And it's so interesting to me that in some cases, you know, there's something else going on in that vehicle. And usually, you know, if there's some network communication problem, there's probably a potential myriad of other codes and things in that system. And somebody has to be able to get in there and sort through that and kind of say, okay, here's what makes sense, versus running down a list of 50 different codes and doing the research on all 50 of those different codes to you know, try to come to terms with. You could spend hours and hours and hours, days, you know, going through and running all the diagnostic procedures per the OEM service information on some of this, and, you know, maybe not even get to the root cause of the problem because of some of the unique things that we see in the collision industry. And I'll go past the collision industry, the service industry as a whole, where some other module someplace else that seems like there's no way that influences this system, but it somehow does tie into one of the subsystems that's an informer to that system, that once it's offline, we're done. You know, that entire system is down, so you lose your ADAS functionality based on something that seems unrelated. And there's a lot of possibilities out there like that. And I think the you know, the math on that, if you were to look at, you know, how many different variables could there be, it's huge. Depends on the make, model, year vehicle and that particular system, and knowing each particular system. Again, at a higher level, understanding the diagnostic process and understanding what's happening in these systems is extremely important. But once you get down into each unique vehicle, they all have their own nuances of you know, how they do what they do and what else ties in, depending on the functionality and features.
Well, and
I think that the point that you were making there, Jason, about getting to diagnostics versus just a scan, I've got a personal example with that one. Not too long ago, my daughter was in an accident. She was rear-ended, and the vehicle, and she's in another state, so Dad couldn't get too involved in the repair process where I'm at now. But she took the vehicle to a repair shop, and I started asking questions about the PreScan. What did you guys find? And after a very long back and forth exchange, I finally got them to tell me that they didn't do a scan. And I said, well, why not? I said, well, that's just a recommendation. So I forwarded them the position statement from the vehicle maker. And then they did the scans after the repairs were done. And I said, great, can you send me the report to show me what codes came up? They sent me the report, and I started asking what they did for diagnostics to figure out what was the cause, what was going on. And I said, oh, I don't know, we just cleared the codes. So I then made them go back and do some more digging, and it turned out that the issue that they had was tied to the clock spring for the airbag. So it was a big, big issue that, in this particular case, they thought, well, I did a pre-scan and a post-scan, I cleared the codes, I'm good. So the understanding of the diagnostics piece of it is huge.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Scott, were you going to say something?
Yeah, even 10 years ago, back when I was in the shop, going back that far before all the ADAS, the service department, we get a lot of them that would bring in a vehicle from another body shop, and they told us, oh, it needs a body control module because it has all these problems. And every time the mechanics would get it, they would go, no, I'll check it out. And almost every time it was a broken wire. And one of the most interesting ones that I found was we had a vehicle that came in that had a whole bunch of faults in a bunch of different systems. And the mechanic came up and said, well, it needs a radio. I said, the radio works fine. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And by the end of I'm like, you have to explain this to me, because I'm going to explain to the customer why I need to put in a radio to, fix all of these unrelated problems, or what seem to be unrelated. And all that on the CAN bus system, everything that went through that radio, something was wrong internally in that. And so we replaced the radio and all the other problems went away. So if you're a diagnostic technician, you know how to kind of look for some of those different things, and you can't just plug in a code reader and expect to get the answer. I mean, you have to actually understand that process. And as a young technician, I mean, I didn't do electrical. That was something the mechanics at the dealership did. And that really opened my eyes to, okay, you really have to look at it a little bit differently. It's different than body work. And, there's just a very different process that if you don't follow it, you're just shooting in the dark, and you're going to throw parts at it all day and never fix the problem.
And potentially make it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, something that you said really, I think, maybe think of something that I've shared with you, a few thousand times probably, but, it's, even if you're not doing the work, I think you absolutely need to understand the systems. You know how they work. You need to understand all the stuff that these guys are talking about as far as the calibration, where the target's going, and the diagnostics, and what a scan is versus the collision repair diagnostics, and how to trace down. You need to know all that information, because even if you're not doing the work, you can't ask a question like Scott just did, about, regarding the radio, unless you understand that. Again, what I've talked to Scott and others, a million times on is glass replacement. Well, we don't do a glass replacement ourselves, so we don't need to take training on glass. No, that's why you need to take training on glass, so you understand what exactly is going to take place to it. So you can have those conversations. Same thing with collision repair diagnostics. Even if you yourself, or you as a technician, or you as your shop isn't going to do the bulk of that work, you absolutely need to understand how these systems operate, how they're designed to operate, and so you can ask the right questions, so that we're not just throwing parts at it. That doesn't do anybody any good. So you really need to have that conversation with your sublet provider, or your mobile vendor, or whomever you've got coming in there to do that work, if you're not doing it. So, Scott, next question. Short question, really long answer, I know. So, what does RTS offer to technicians around ADAS and calibration?
Well, probably the best way to show that is just to kind of go over the website real quick. So I'll share my screen here. And so for those of you that are familiar with the RTS website, like I said earlier, there might be quite a few areas that you're not aware of. One of the first one is we actually are allowing free access through May. So time is running out. We did that as part of the whole COVID-19 issues out there to kind of help the industry a little bit. if you are a gold class shop, platinum individual, have taken 6 hours of training, this is already available to you for free. And we really encourage you to take the training, because the RTS website is really meant to tell you why you need to go to training. It's to bring awareness of all these different things and systems out there and different issues that are coming up from a technical point of view. And we're going to tell you some of these things in articles or different pieces of information. And it's really to get you to understand that there's a lot out here that you need to pay attention to. We kind of digest it down in a little easier to understand chunks. And then we want to direct you to that training that's relevant to the subject we're talking about. So it's really the why you need to go to training, and then you go to training to learn how to do some of these different things. So one of the first areas that I'm going to just highlight really quickly is our collision repair news articles. These are all articles. These are always open to the public, and they will get you to different pieces of information. So this is one that came up recently, that the research tips. We started doing this series because as we're doing a lot of the calibration research, we're finding a lot of little nuances in all these systems, and we're trying to help you understand where to find that information and help interpret some of that information as well. And in this case, the taillights on an F-150, if it's destroyed and completely wiped out, you have to download things from that module. So if that module is gone, you have another process that you have to go and do. So if you take that module off and you're going to R&I it, you're fine. You don't have to do any programming or anything of that. But if you have to replace it, before you throw that out, you want to download the data from that module and put it into the new taillight. So something like that could really save you a lot of time and comebacks and issues just by having awareness of it. So again, we're not going to tell you exactly step by step how to do it or take the place of OEM procedures, but just highlight, hey, you need to be aware of this. So when you're working on these vehicles, you need to pay attention and do additional research on it. And then over on OEM information, there is another one here. We've actually written so many articles around ADAS and calibration. We've actually created this button here, which is all the Ford Lincoln specific ADAS articles we've written. So if it's relevant to Ford, like the article I just shared, it gathers all those articles up in one convenient place, so you can go through and really look at all of the different pieces and do different finds. And if you're working on a lot of Fords, you should be watching this page quite often, because there's going to be a lot of really good information that comes out of that. And then we also have our OEM Calibration Requirements search. And on this page, we will have a lot of different information for you. And it's not going to give you the repair procedures. That's not what we're here for. There's a lot of different sources for repair procedures, but this is to help you find the repair procedures. When we were doing this research, there are over 200 different system names across the vehicle makers that for the 15 or so systems out there. So, if you're looking for adaptive cruise control on this vehicle, you'll find it. But if you were looking for the blind spot detection system, you're not going to find it unless it's under BLIS. So if you don't know what it's called, it's very hard to find that information sometimes. So we set this website, or this section of the website, up to help you find that information by giving you kind of the general term for it, and then going through and identifying the OEM name for it. And some of these names are very close and some are very different. And then we always talk about the systems, but the systems aren't the true problem, because it's when we disturb a camera or sensor or something in that system is damaged, we have to go to that damaged part. That's not necessarily the system. So when we go through this, we give you the sensor and the approximate location. And then we'll give you if there's a calibration event required or not. So that'll tell you, does it need a calibration? And on this particular one, there isn't, but we give you a note that you have to transfer that data from the existing module before you replace it. And if you don't have that module because it's completely destroyed, there is a process to do it. It's a different process using the scan tool. So we also list out on both the collision repair news articles and on here, we'll list out the courses that you can take to learn more about the different subjects. So this kind of is a way to guide you. So we'll give you some information you need to know, but then to take it to the next step and get that training, that's where you can go to find out what courses are most relevant for what you want to learn right now. So, you know, we have our pro levels and our training pass, but if you're working on something, you need to understand something today, here are some courses. The articles are very specific on this course is one where you can find more information to learn more about this subject. So those are kind of the main areas around ADAS and calibration I wanted to share with you today. You know, there's a lot more to the website, but for today, that's our focus.
Hey, Scott, if you could scroll up and maybe walk us through a little bit more, you know, for one of the sensors or cameras that does have a calibration requirement, maybe talk a little bit about how could I incorporate the RTS information here into my blueprinting process, into my overall repair plan?
So, you know, the one of the main powers of this part of the website is that you can come here and if you think, okay, is there a calibration? You could spend hours and hours looking for the calibration. Or you could come up here and go, okay, if parking aid sensor is removed, you have to do an operation check. So it's not a calibration, but it's basically a calibration. You have to set up a target, make sure it responds. So there's different things that you need. You're going to require special tools. You're going to need a scan tool, and it will set DTCs if there's a problem in that system. So we've already kind of given you a path to go, okay, here are the things that we need to go and do more research on. I need to figure out, do I have these special tools? Do I have a scan tool that's capable of doing this? Because if you don't, now you're going to either have to have a sublet vendor or take it over to the dealership, and it'll help you be that first step to know, I need to do further research on this sensor or the system to build that right into that blueprint process.
Yeah. So even if I'm working on a system that may not be associated, if I've got some bumper damage, I'm removing the bumper, or if I'm taking a windshield out, this would tell me that, hey, even if you're not touching that forward-facing camera, if you take the windshield out, you're going to need to calibrate that system.
Yeah, and here's a great example of that: the camera near the rearview mirror. If the windshield's replaced, if the tire there's a change in tire size, suspension is repaired, front airbag deployed, interior mirror is replaced. So these are all pretty benign things that you may not think about it. And you know, if you come to the website, you can find out, okay, here are all the things that these different systems use, all these sensors, and these are the calibrations that you need to worry about and research to get that repair procedure.
And I also noticed towards the top again, you've got an indication for the malfunction indicator lamps. Don't all these systems have mill lamps that turn on when there's an issue?
One of our favorite subjects, right? Yeah, I don't know how many times we've heard, oh, if there's no light, it's fine. That is the farthest thing from the truth I think we could ever possibly get. I have no idea where that came from. You know, those lights are on the dash to alert the driver, hey, you need to maybe take this in to get it looked at. It's not for diagnostics. So a lot of these systems will set DTCs, but they don't turn on any kind of malfunction indicator lamp. They go, there's something going on in the background, there's something strange. We're just going to store this code, but we're not going to turn on any lights. You may get something like system not available or something like that, but it's not always going to be the dash light that tells you, hey, you need to do further research. So that was another piece that we added in here to help guide you to, this is where you need to look for further information. And, you know, right here, adaptive cruise control system, it doesn't set a mill light. So if that's not operating, that's kind of a big one.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, just a reminder, everybody on the call, if you've got questions for these guys, please feel free to use the chat button or the Q&A area. So we've got 3 of ICAR subject matter experts here, and love to be able to pick their brains if you've got questions related to ICAR offerings surrounding ADAS or even some other courseware potentially. So let's see what else, Scott. With regarding to with RTS, you kind of went over some of the articles and some of the links to some of the training programs. Was there anything else ADAS related, best practices or any other information on the website for regarding ADAS?
Yeah, so the best practices page, when we do a best practice, it's not just what ICAR says. We gather together industry experts in all the different fields that relate to whatever best practice. And these were developed to supplement OEM information. So it never takes the place of OEM information, but if there is no OEM information on it, it's meant to kind of fill in that gap. And so when we gather all these subject matter experts, we discuss a topic, it's technical in nature. We really focus in on the technical aspect of it. And so we go through and review this best practice. We will then, from that meeting, we'll send out the meeting notes and let everyone that was invited to that meeting have their input. So it has full awareness. So it's a truly industry vetted best practice that the industry has put together with us, and we're just the mechanism to publish it out. And so this one is the pre-repair scan process. And it really just breaks down and goes through all these different processes that you have to pay attention to. And then even that the post-repair calibration is not a post-scan. You actually have to go and do the research, find out what needs to be repaired correctly and calibrated. And then so you might end up doing that several times if you keep finding issues or you keep having problems. So it's not I plugged it in, it cleared all the codes, and now I'm good to go. It's really a process that you have to go through until all the problems are found and repaired.
Okay. Yeah, I think that that's an important point that Scott just made too, with regard to what ICAR publishes here, and frankly, with all the courses, even, right? That it's not Scott and the RTS team and Bud and Jeff sitting down together and just throwing some stuff on a piece of paper and coming up with these best practices. They are developed with the inter-industry, and that includes OEMs, correct, and insurers and collision repair facilities and other subject matter experts. So it really is developed by the industry for the industry. And I think that's one thing I really appreciate and really like about the RTS feature, and a lot of stuff that ICAR does is, again, it's not just a small group of people that are putting these together. These are industry best practices, and I think that that's important to recognize when you're having conversations with others that may disagree with something that they run into. It's been through an extensive vetting process, and I think that that's always important to remember. Let's see here. We do have one comment here. How about explaining that there could be no DTC or mill and the system is not operating properly, like adaptive cruise control, and the camera is not in the proper place? You guys want to chime in on that?
I'll jump in there on that. That's one of the things about electronic systems. With electronic systems, and I'll change the conversation over to perhaps powertrain control, where you've got certain sensors that are sending data to the powertrain control module that essentially manages the operation of the engine and transmission. So those sensors are expected to bring certain data in, and they've got certain set parameters, and in certain ways they can do cross checks amongst each other to some degree, that for implausible conditions. And as we move into the world of ADAS, in some cases this becomes a little more difficult and I'll use an analogy of, if you're driving down the road and you've got your head turned to the side a little bit, kind of looking at the passenger or having a conversation with the passenger, you're starting to miss stuff out of the peripheral on the left, and that becomes missed information. Now, there's pieces of this that you don't, and I'm gonna go with a Mark Olson phrase. You don't know what you don't know, and that becomes really critical with these systems. In that, what are the limits of tolerance in doing a calibration or something being off, and whenever I think about this topic, when you're doing a calibration, the vehicle manufacturer gives you specific criteria in order to perform that calibration. They don't give you a tolerance. They say, oh, well, it's okay if the target's off a little bit. No, that's unacceptable, because you're putting that set reference, that set target at a set reference point, and that becomes, I'll say, now I know where the center of my vision needs to be for straight ahead relative to this vehicle, for whatever sensor that is, whether it's a camera or a radar. And we don't necessarily know all the specifics of, well, how far off is okay. To me, no far off is okay. It's got to be spot on, because you're doing that calibration, no different than a scale or a scope on a rifle or something like that. It needs to be dialed in correctly for that particular setup. And so there can certainly be situations where a vehicle, if the calibration, if something's off a little bit, at what point does it become so far off that this system can now collaborate data with other systems to realize it's wrong? And some of the systems might flag that sooner. Other systems might flag that days later. In other cases, it may go unrecognized with just erratic system performance. And we've seen situations like that out there where folks who we've talked with have said, hey, yeah, we had this vehicle and we took it out for a test drive and everything seemed okay for a little while, and then this odd thing happened. Or perhaps it's a situation where it got back in the hands of the customer and the customer is back a week later and they're like, hey, this thing's doing bizarre stuff. So that's where we start to look at these systems, and while the technology is continuing to evolve and the algorithms, the programs in the background that are processing this data are getting better and better with each passing year, we still have to, as we sit back and we look at these systems and the work we perform, is our work solid? Are we 100% on with everything we're doing in the repairs of these vehicles? Because if we're not, there may be some unintended consequence out there under some different condition that we can't, So when you take this vehicle out for a test drive, and hopefully we're taking them out for test drives, how do you on a test drive test the automatic electronic braking system, the automatic emergency braking system? And it's kind of like the question of, hey, I've replaced the airbags in this car.
Yeah.
How do you know they're going to work next time? If you've done all the procedures right and you've done all your work right, they should work. Does anybody really want to test that feature? I don't know. It gets a little bit challenging. So there obviously there's certain features with these vehicles we can go out and test, but are we going to be testing them on every different potential circumstance that vehicle might encounter? That'd be an awful long test drive. Sign me up.
So just to piggyback on some of that a little bit, first, we talked a little bit just a minute ago about all the collaboration that was done with the RTS best practices and things like that. Just so everybody's clear, we do the same type of collaboration when we're building courses. We're working with OEMs as we're working on these ADAS courses. There's a number of folks that we've worked with that are industry professionals that are on this. I see them in the chat box now. They're out there. So we work with them as well. It's not Bud and Jeff in a lab putting these courses together. We're out in the real world working with these folks that are doing it every day to understand the challenges they face. And along what Jeff was just talking about, and the question that started with the adaptive cruise, on one of these field visits with some of the experts, we went to a location with them where they were going to perform, I guess, give us a demo on performing a calibration on an adaptive cruise, and they didn't think that it was actually going to need it because the vehicle was only in for some hail repairs. So it turns out when we got there, it took the better part of 2 hours to get the vehicle calibrated because the sensor was that far off. During the hail repairs, they had removed the bumper and done some hail repairs on the fenders, and it caused that camera to be substantially out of focus, so to speak. It wasn't calibrated properly, and there were no DTCs of any kind that told us that it was incorrect. Had we not gone there just to do this this example calibration, the vehicle most likely would have gone back to the customer without the system functioning properly.
Jeff, I really liked your analogy of head turning. I've been using the scope analogy for a long time with regard to aiming and stuff like that, but I think that's your head turning. Everybody can relate to that, even if you're not a hunter, right? That, I mean, again, you see what you see, and it just because you're looking the wrong way doesn't mean you're not seeing anything. You're just not seeing that target anymore. So I think that's a great one. I'm gonna steal that one if you don't mind.
Not a problem.
Cool.
Yeah, the cameras, and that's something that while cameras, when we think about seeing an image on a video reproduced off a camera, it doesn't quite work the same for the way these systems then process data, because they're very quickly taking snapshots, and then they've got algorithms running in the background in the software that are identifying objects and lane markings and things like that. And again, if your head's tilted or you turn to the side or whatever, your view of the world is skewed a little bit, and who knows what the output is out of that particular system at that point in time, and is there that fast approaching vehicle that's off in that peripheral that's missing just a little bit, where potentially those milliseconds count for that system to do what it's supposed to do, and mitigate, if that's the situation, mitigate the loss.
And one other thing that I think we haven't touched on is a lot of these sensors, they don't know they've been replaced. They get power, they're on, and everything looks good. The system thinks everything's operating fine. It doesn't know that it has been replaced. And so if you miss a calibration, it may look like it's all well and good, but it might be off quite a bit, either height-wise, left or right. And all of a sudden now, instead of looking at the vehicle in front, it's looking over at the ditch, applying brakes when it's not supposed to, swerving the vehicle. There's a million different things and situations that can come up just because there's no way for that system to know that part was replaced and is no longer in the correct location.
Sure. Yeah, they're cameras and sensors, right? They're just sensing, they're seeing. And I one of the articles I always go back to is the Repair Driven News article from a couple of years ago on the IHS Honda Civic study that they did with the forward-facing camera and some of the misalignments, and being off 0.6 of 1 degree at the windshield made a huge difference and ultimately caused a collision. So I think that's important for us to keep in mind as we're doing all this stuff. And Jeff, also I really appreciate you emphasizing there is no tolerance for this. I've never been a big fan of tolerance when it comes to three-dimensional measuring, even, but now we're talking again life and death here when it comes to some of these systems. And if that vehicle isn't braking because it doesn't see the vehicle or sense the vehicle or thinks it's still another 100 yards out in front of us because we didn't calibrate it properly, that's on us, and that's a huge issue and goes in the face of complete safe and quality repairs.
I was just catching Buck's comment that he sent in: physical aiming, looking in the general direction, versus optically aiming, fine-tuning precise direction. Thank you. That's a very good way to put it, Buck. Yeah,
absolutely. So again, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to use the Q&A or the chat feature on there. So guys, if somebody does have a suggestion for an ADAS training topic or any training topic for that matter, who should they contact? What's the process for that if I've got an idea for an ICAR course?
Well, obviously any of us are willing to field that call if they ever have if they want to contact us directly. But you can go to the ICAR website, and if you go to the contact me at the bottom of the page, it's just the main website, and there's going to be another button that says suggestions and recommendations. And when you click on that, it will drop down a little form, and you can just take some very basic contact information, and then it gives you a free form box to kind of give us an idea of what your suggestion might be, so that we can then, as a team, take a look at it and then reach back out to you to talk more about the idea that you've got and how that could potentially turn into a new course or maybe an article or whatever is appropriate for the topic.
Okay. Here, Scott's going to pull it up for us.
There you go.
We'll scroll to the bottom. Contact us. Suggestions and recommendations. There you go. Cool. Awesome. And for those of you that maybe if you forget about that or don't know where it is and you want to get a hold of these guys, you can certainly email me at jason@collisionhub.com, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with these gentlemen to answer any questions that you might have or suggestions or whatever as well. So, guys, anything else? Any other thoughts? No?
No, I'm good here.
Cool. So I'm not seeing any other open questions coming in or any other chat features that are coming in here. So I guess that about brings us to the end. Again, Scott, that the URL for the RTS website is
rts.i-car.com.
okay, cool, and that's available to everybody for free until the end of May.
Yes, that's
Is that
correct.
correct? And even the parts that do require a login, there are still a lot of open areas in here that are always available. So as Scott mentioned, the collision repair news area is one of those areas. So several times a week, ICAR is publishing articles. Nice thing I like about them is they're short articles. They're not big, long feature articles. It's just right, short, to the point. So appreciate you and your teams and all your efforts for that. And certainly give my best to the RTS team for me. So
Will do.
and the rest of the
This
Tech
is
Center, hope you
really a
guys can
great
all get back
opportunity.
to the Tech Center pretty soon here and get back to work.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. Well, with that, everybody, again, I appreciate your time. Thank you to ICAR, not just the technical folks that we've got on here, but the other folks from ICAR that are on the call this morning. I really appreciate your time and your efforts and all that you do for the collision repair industry. Keep up the great work, and look forward to continuing to work with you very closely. That's also a wrap for Collision Hub webinars this week, but we'll be back next week. So certainly looking forward to having you. I think we're kicking off Tuesday. Kristen's got a webinar on using Google Drive for file documentation. So that's going to be an interesting one. I'm going to tune into that one and hopefully learn a lot from her on that one. So with that, guys, really appreciate your time again, and hope everybody has a great rest of your day and a happy and safe weekend.
All right, thanks.
You too.
Thanks, guys.